The glass tower of Harrington and Co. Consulting rose above the street like a symbol of power, money, and decisions that shaped other people's lives. On a cloudy Monday morning, Daniel Brooks stood across the road holding a leather folder tightly in his left hand. Cars rushed past him, splashing water from last night's rain, but he barely noticed. His focus was fixed on the building. Today mattered. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he had already fought too hard to be here. Daniel was 33 years old, black, and had learned early in life that effort was never enough on its own. You needed proof, you needed patience, and sometimes you needed the strength to stay calm when the world questioned your right to stand in a room. He adjusted his tie, straightened his shoulders, and crossed the street. The security desk sat just inside the revolving doors. A white guard glanced up as Daniel approached. His eyes lingered longer than usual, scanning Daniel's face, his suit, his shoes. "Where are you headed?" the guard asked. "I have an interview." "Ninth floor," Daniel replied evenly. The guard nodded slowly. "ID." Daniel handed it over without comment. He had expected this. The guard checked it twice, then once more, before returning it with a neutral grunt. No apology, no explanation. Daniel stepped past him, reminding himself to breathe. The lobby was pristine white marble floors, soft instrumental music, and a massive digital screen looping corporate slogans about inclusion and opportunity. Daniel couldn't help but notice the irony. At the reception desk, a young woman typed quickly on her keyboard. She looked up, smiled automatically, then hesitated. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm here for the senior analyst interview at 9. Her smile stiffened. "Oh, okay. Let me check." She typed, frowned, then typed again. "I don't see you here." Daniel calmly pulled out his phone. "I have the confirmation email." She scanned it, nodded, and cleared her throat. "All right, have a seat." Daniel sat in the waiting area beside 4 other candidates, all white, all relaxed. One laughed quietly at something on his phone. Another sipped coffee. Like this was just another casual stop in his day. No one else was asked for ID. No one else was questioned. At 9 o'clock sharp, a man in a navy suit stepped out and called a name. One candidate stood and followed him. Another name, another candidate. Daniel waited. 9:30 passed. At 9:45, a blonde woman finally appeared. She scanned the room briefly, then asked, "Daniel Brooks?" "I'm here," Daniel said, standing. She blinked in mild surprise. "Follow me." The interview room was large and cold, with a long table separating Daniel from 4 interviewers. Nameplates sat neatly in front of them. The blonde woman introduced herself as Susan Clark, HR Director. The others barely nodded. The questions began formally but quickly turned sharp. "Tell us about your background," one man said, leaning back. Daniel answered clearly, confidently. Another interviewer interrupted. "Are you sure you handled that project yourself?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "I led the analysis team." Susan scribbled notes without looking up. "This university you attended, can you explain why we should trust its standards?" Daniel paused. "It's nationally accredited and ranked among the top programs in the state." A faint smirk crossed one man's face. "Interesting." As the interview continued, Daniel felt it. The subtle disbelief, the quiet resistance. His answers were questioned more aggressively than necessary. His tone was watched. His confidence seemed to make them uncomfortable. Then, suddenly, the door opened. A tall man in his late 50s stepped inside. The room changed instantly. Everyone straightened. Susan stood. "Mr. Harrington," she said nervously. Please sit, the man replied calmly. He turned his attention to Daniel. You must be Daniel Brooks. Yes, sir. I've been observing this interview from next door, Mr. Harrington said. I like to see how we treat people before we decide their future. Silence filled the room. Mr. Harrington looked at Daniel. Why do you want to work here? Daniel took a breath. Because I'm qualified. Because I work hard. And because I believe opportunity should be based on merit, not comfort. Mr. Harrington nodded slowly. Then he turned to the panel. What I just witnessed was deeply disappointing. Susan swallowed. Sir, we were just you questioned his education, delayed his interview, and treated him differently. Mr. Harrington said firmly. That is not inclusion. He turned back to Daniel. You handled this with professionalism. I'm offering you the position. Senior analyst, effective immediately. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Thank you, sir. I accept. Mr. Harrington nodded. Good. This interview is over. The panel sat frozen as Daniel walked out. Outside, Daniel stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, letting the city noise wash over him. He called his mother. Ma, he said softly, I got the job. She cried on the phone. Daniel smiled for the first time that day. The first weeks at Harrington & Co. were not easy. Some colleagues congratulated him sincerely. Others kept their distance. Daniel noticed the whispers, the side glances, the subtle tests. He didn't respond with anger. He responded with excellence. He stayed late. He double-checked his work. He spoke when necessary and listened when it mattered. Slowly, people began to notice. Reports improved. Projects moved faster. Meetings ran smoother. One afternoon, Susan Clark approached his desk. Daniel, she said quietly, can we talk? In her office, she looked uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, she said. I thought I was fair. That interview showed me I wasn't. Daniel nodded. Acknowledging it is a start. Weeks later, mandatory bias training was announced company-wide. Some employees complained. Others listened. Stories were shared. Hard truths surfaced. Walls cracked. Daniel became a mentor to junior analysts. One evening, he noticed a young black intern staring blankly at her screen. You okay? He asked. I feel like I have to be perfect, she admitted. Like one mistake will confirm everything they think. Daniel smiled gently. You don't need perfection. You need confidence in your worth. Months passed. Daniel's work earned recognition. His name appeared on company newsletters. His voice carried weight in meetings. One day, in the elevator, the same security guard from Daniel's first day stood beside him. Good morning, sir, the guard said awkwardly. Daniel nodded. Good morning. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. Later that year, Daniel stood on the building's rooftop during sunset, city lights glowing below. He thought about that first interview, the doubt, the silence, the resistance. He hadn't just earned a job. He had changed a room, and sometimes that was how change began, not with shouting, but with truth standing its ground. Over the following months, the company began to change in ways Daniel hadn't expected. Hiring panels were restructured, interview questions were standardized, observers were quietly added to final interviews, not to intimidate, but to ensure accountability. It wasn't announced publicly as a revolution, but people felt it. The air inside Harrington & Co. slowly shifted from comfort-based decisions to competence-based ones. Daniel didn't pretend the change was easy. There were still moments when his ideas were challenged more aggressively than others. Still moments when silence followed his comments longer than it should have. But there were also moments of progress, real ones. Moments when his data stopped debates. Moments when his analysis became the foundation of decisions. Moments when his presence alone widened the room for others. One afternoon, Daniel received a message from the internship coordinator asking if he would speak at a small internal event for new hires. He hesitated at first. Public speaking had never been his goal, but he remembered the intern he had spoken 2 months earlier, the fear in her voice when she talked about perfection. He agreed. The room wasn't large. Maybe 20 people sat in folding chairs, notebooks in their laps. Daniel stood at the front, hands relaxed at his sides. "I'm not here to motivate you," he began. "I'm here to be honest." That caught their attention. "There will be days when you'll feel like you don't belong," he continued. "Days when your qualifications won't seem loud enough, when your presence will feel questioned before your words are heard." Several heads nodded quietly. "When that happens," Daniel said, "remember this rooms don't define your worth. Your work does. And if a room isn't ready for you, sometimes your job is to change it." The applause was soft, but sincere. After the session, the young intern he had once spoken to approached him. She smiled, this time without fear. "Thank you," she said. "I stayed." Daniel nodded. "Good. We need you." Late one evening, Daniel found himself once again alone in the office. The lights were dimmed, the building quiet. He opened an old folder on his laptop, his original resume, the one he had sent before the interview. He stared at it for a moment, realizing how close it had come to being ignored entirely. He thought about how many others never got a second look. How many stories ended before they began. That night, Daniel drafted a proposal for a partnership with local university schools, often overlooked by corporate recruiters. He didn't frame it as charity, he framed it as strategy. Talent existed everywhere, he wrote. Access did not. The proposal passed. Months later, Daniel stood in the same lobby where he had once been questioned. This time, he wasn't a visitor. He was guiding a group of new interns through the building. Different backgrounds, different accents, different stories. As they passed the security desk, the guard smiled and waved them through without hesitation. Daniel noticed but didn't comment. When the tour ended, Daniel lingered near the windows, watching the city move. He understood now that progress wasn't loud. It wasn't instant. It was built moment by moment, decision by decision, person by person. He had walked into a room that doubted him. He had stayed, he had spoken, and he had left the door wider than he found it. That was enough.